professionals and really executives at organizations of all sizes are having to deal with. The first is the large explosion of devices that are happening at every single organization that we work with, whether you're a small business or a medium-sized business or an enterprise business. All of them are seeing a huge amount of devices enter the workplace. The days where you would show up to work and you would be presented with one desktop and one monitor are far in the rearview mirror at this point. Most times at most organizations, you'll show up and you may be given a laptop or a laptop and a tablet, or even a laptop, a tablet, and a cell phone. And for many of our organizations that are on a more advanced trajectory, rather than providing those devices to staff, they're actually expecting staff to come in with a functional cell phone, with a functional laptop, even with a functional tablet in some cases. And so both the corporate explosion of devices as well as that bring your own device phenomena has really started to transform the way that IT deals with device support. Because again, if you planned for supporting one desktop per person in the past, it's very difficult to move from one desktop to 5 different devices. Even I have a laptop, I have a tablet, I have an e-reader, I have a cell phone. I mean, that's 4 devices. And as soon as you start to look at that greater number of devices, those support costs will certainly increase as well. One of the other big changes that's started to occur have been the explosion of apps. It's not just that people are using different form factors and different pieces of hardware. They're actually consuming a lot more applications than they did in the past. When you think about that traditional legacy model of one desktop and one monitor per person, I might use 2 or 3 line of business apps, maybe an office productivity suite as well. But the total number of apps that I was working with on a day-to-day basis was quite limited. I didn't have mapping apps. I didn't have apps that gave me reviews of different organizations. I didn't have social media apps that I was logging into to check in and update on a regular basis. And so the number of those apps that have started to grow for individuals means, again, if you're an IT organization, it can be difficult to manage and maintain those devices that have the apps on them. It's not good enough to give someone a working tablet or a working laptop anymore. Now every person who works for you wants to have a functional app on that platform as well. And we've seen this at organizations that we support with every single day. A lot of the support calls that are generated aren't necessarily that the hardware is broken. It's not that the tablet has stopped functioning or that the laptop can't connect to the internet. It's that even with that base level of connectivity, the application might be misbehaving or it might be not working in a way that's friendly to the user. Also, another big change that's occurring at organizations of all sizes is an explosion of big data. We've seen this in the social space. We've seen this in the analytics space. The idea that you're working with very small data sets and making changes to small amounts of data is simply something that's occurring in the past. And if you haven't embraced the idea of these large data sets that you can get access to, it may mean that you simply don't know what your competitors are doing at the same time. And IT frequently is being asked to provide insights and analysis of what these large data sets are capable of doing. It could be going out and getting reviews of your competitors. It could be looking to a new business market that you haven't worked in before. Regardless of where you're looking, those large data sets are growing, and the sheer size and scope of them is something that IT has also been deemed to be responsible for. The days of saying, well, we don't have enough space or we don't have enough processing power to handle these sorts of workloads really are something that the other C-level executives don't want to hear. They want the IT organization to always be capable of delivering enough energy and enough processing power as needed for organizations. And this goes well into the final trend, which is cloud. So a lot of organizations in the past have invested heavily in on-premises solutions. Over the past, I'd say 3 to 5 years, we've seen that shift dramatically to cloud-based solutions. Things like Windows Azure, things like Office 365. These are all services that light up in the public cloud capabilities that otherwise you wouldn't be able to take advantage of. And it's certainly true that although I would say small businesses and medium-sized businesses are moving more aggressively to the cloud, it's because those capabilities were already present for some of the larger organizations that are out there. And what we've seen over the past 3 to 5 years has been that as these more nimble organizations have started to move to the cloud more rapidly, the larger or slower organizations have started to realize if they're on a 3 or a 5-year refresh of their server hardware or to look back at the services that they're offering their staff or their customers, those are starting to renew, and they're starting to realize even at large organizations they can't match the processing power or certainly the value inherent in these public cloud solutions. So what does that mean for you as a business owner and a business leader? And it's 4 very simple concepts that I want to emphasize. On the device standpoint, you want people to use any device to work from anywhere. So again, moving away from that desktop model to I have a tablet, I have a laptop, I can work from a coffee shop, I can work from my house, I can work at a remote location if there's a power outage in my primary location. Secondarily, on the application front, I want my business apps to evolve to meet my business's needs. And this is what we've seen over the past, I'd say 10 years, is apps that were written a long time ago, these legacy apps that have a poorly designed user interface and a poorly designed ability to scale, and in some cases an almost non-existent mechanism to work on multiple platforms. People want to be able to use those applications, regardless of whether there's something that you developed in-house or there's something that you purchased from a curated store. They want those to work on all of their devices, regardless of where they are. So it's a big focus to make sure that you're not only getting access to the latest Angry Birds game, but that you also have access to your financial data. You also have access to the HR system that you're using on a variety of different devices. In terms of big data, it's making sure that you can make those decisions quickly, regardless again of the type of infrastructure that you have internally, which goes to my final point, which is the cloud, to make sure that your own infrastructure will be able to scale up and scale down or scale out depending upon your business needs. These are 4, I would say, small questions, but they, for most organizations, present unique challenges. And this is where Microsoft comes in to provide a value. Obviously, they have an enterprise-grade platform. Microsoft has been around the block for quite some time, helping businesses like yours and many others reach their goals. That's, when I say enterprise-grade, what I mean is that there won't be changes that occur overnight that break things. And that's one of the big advantages of working with Microsoft is they work with customers from very small SMB customers all the way up to 200,000, 500,000 person companies that are delivering things at scale. And when you work with that many different types of customers, the one thing you can't do is you can't put out a product that doesn't scale up, and you can't put out a product that's going to change in a week and break something that's worked for years in the past. Hybrid design, being able to take advantage of clouds both internally and externally to your organization. You may not be able to match the scale of Microsoft, but you may be able to have a co-location facility or 2 or 3. And if you do, being able to use your own equipment or another service provider's equipment to provide that access is something Microsoft is very, very committed to. And then finally, and we'll see this as we dive into the Enterprise Mobility Suite itself, making sure that it's a people-focused approach. And this has been a common concern of many organizations that have dealt with IT organizations within them that have not been as flexible. If security is so onerous that people are looking to work around it, if the devices that aren't supported are the ones that enable people to get their work done or to work from the weekend, IT can be seen as a blocker. And Microsoft's commitment is to make sure it's always a people-focused approach rather than being something that's focused on specific hardware components or software components. And so to be able to link these two together, and we'll see this as we dive into the product suite, with the Microsoft Cloud OS vision, we want to be able to make sure that that data center is transformed from something that IT owns to something that scales up and down as needed by the business, that it's focused like a laser on people-centric IT, that is focused on the business needs of individuals within it, that you can get insights on any piece of data that's entered into the system, and that you can use modern business apps So rather than being limited to having modern apps be games and fun things that you're consuming, that you can actually have business apps that allow you to get your business working from there. Let's talk some raw numbers. So 52% of information workers across a large variety of countries are working on 3 or more devices. I already mentioned that I have an e-reader and a tablet and a cell phone. Tablets are blowing up in terms of use across organizations, both at small, medium, and large ones. It's not just a phenomenon that's limited to smaller organizations. Even very large organizations are saying, hey, we've noticed that people are using these tablets more and more to be able to get their work done. And when you pair that tablet use with the 3 or more devices for work, the principal argument in the past has been, hey, I've got all of these devices because they each serve a different role. I can't keep my tablet inside my pocket. I have a cell phone, which is great for consuming content, but I never want to use my cell phone to create content, which is why I might use a tablet or a laptop. Certainly Microsoft's announcement of the Surface 3 as a way to reduce those number of devices is a step in the right direction. But even with that, people will likely still have cell phones and a tablet which they use to do their work. And finally, 90% of enterprises have multiple mobile operating systems to support in 2017. 90%. So effectively, almost every business here is going to not be locked into a homogeneous ecosystem, and that's been something that's been some time coming in the mirror. We've certainly seen this. We work with organizations that are mostly iOS, mostly Android, mostly Windows Phone, and even at the most, I would say, strident of organizations about keeping things homogeneous and centralized, what you start to see is executives bring in phones that they purchased from Best Buy. You get people who went to an Apple store or a Microsoft store that bring in devices, and inevitably you start to get a much more homogeneous landscape, which is what we would expect. Smartphones and tablets are becoming much more price sensitive, and as that price comes down, you start to see a greater number of people adopt them, which is driving the utilization, but also driving the fact that you will have multiple operating systems that you need to support. All of which is frustrating if you're an IT person, because you've got a lot of challenges that you need to make sense of. I mentioned earlier that people expect to be able to work in any location. And when I say work, what that means is they expect to be able to take that tablet or that cell phone or that laptop and go into any location that has an internet connection and have access to their work resources. They also expect to be able to take that device offline if they're on a train or a plane and be able to use it in that scenario too. So that's if you think back 10 years ago, those sorts of scenarios simply didn't exist at most organizations. You didn't have a large number of people who were saying, hey, we desperately need to work on the weekend or after hours or from these different locations that don't have a VPN set up. So that's a big change for most IT organizations to be able to wrap their hands around. But that's just the base level for what IT needs to be able to adapt to. The next level above that is making sure that those devices that are out there maintain the standards that you've set as a corporate organization. And this is where we see a lot of IT shops, stumble a bit, is that they understand that people want to be able to work from any location, but their ultimate fear is not giving them access to the corporate network and corporate resources. Their fear is that that device, especially a smaller device like a cell phone or a tablet, could be lost, it could be damaged, it could be stolen. And if those devices aren't properly protected, if they don't, for instance, require encryption, if they don't require a password, to get into them, then the data that's contained within them could be lost, and it could be found by someone who's malicious. And so that's the real threat there. Is it's relatively easy if you have one model of hardware to support, or two models to say, hey, we're only supporting this corporate desktop and this corporate laptop, and that's it. And we're not going to support any mobile phone OSs. It's very easy to build a corporate policy for that. But as soon as you start to say, well, we'll allow mobile devices to be supported, and you know what, we're going to support all 3 of the big ones. We're going to support iOS, we're going to support Android, we'll support Windows Phone. As soon as you start to make those, in essence, security compromises, it means that you're increasing the amount of time that you have to spend supporting the devices. And one of the stories that I like to tell customers is we recently completed a large cloud migration of an email platform for a customer from an on-premise system to Office 365. Great migration, everything went smoothly. I would say the largest amount of time spent during that migration wasn't the work done beforehand, and it wasn't the training and education. It was actually the mobile device management portion of it, because what many firms don't realize is that mobile device component is actually a very large component, especially as many of the other services have become streamlined and productized. Having to grab every person and touch every device tends to be a large lift for most organizations if they don't have any sort of mobile device management solution. I mentioned the apps earlier, and that is a frustrating bit for many consumers of these services. I want to make sure that my app runs on all the big vendors. I want to make sure that if I have a Windows 8 device, that my Windows Phone device also has the same application there as well. And being able to deploy and manage those apps. If I, as a corporate customer, have a line of business app, let's say a financial system or an HR system, if I develop a mobile application for that, I want to be able to deploy that to an iOS device or an Android device, or even a Windows Phone 8 or a Windows 8 device without having to do a lot of lifting to move it between all of them. I really want to be able to deploy that to every single individual. And historically in the past, that's been a large lift. Finally, from a data protection standpoint, the data itself. What I tell customers when they're talking about securing the device is they really are concerned with wiping that specific device. If I have a cell phone and I leave it in a taxi cab, the data that's contained on that cell phone, if someone either knows my PIN or I haven't assigned a PIN to it, anyone could pick up that phone and start to dial some phone numbers and look through the contact list and maybe even plug in a USB drive and start to get some of that information off of it. So by the time the data has made it to a device, there's already a security risk involved, to be able to secure that data. In reality, you need to protect the data before it even makes it to that device. Because even though I can guarantee that my devices that I have control over are secure, there's no mechanism right now to say, oh, well, what if I forwarded that email to someone outside the organization? Or what if I sent that Word document to someone at another customer who opened it on their cell phone that wasn't encrypted or wasn't managed by a corporate policy? And in that case, you really need to secure the data at the source to meet both your compliance requirements as well as just a basic risk assessment. If something's sensitive, maybe you're not in a highly regulated industry, maybe you're just looking to prevent corporate information from going outside your corporate boundary. There could be information that's sensitive. Sometimes it's on an as-needed basis even, to be able to say, I want to make sure this Word document doesn't get sent to the press. I want to make sure that this Excel spreadsheet that contains sensitive salary information doesn't go to anyone outside of these 5 individuals that I want to be able to maintain control over. But maybe I don't want people to print it. Maybe I don't want people to forward that email on to another person. So that idea of data protection is critical to making sure that you can provide your staff with the confidence that they can work securely. So how does Enterprise Mobility Suite fit into all of those requirements? So it launched April 1st, and it's actually composed of 3 different products within the suite. The way I like to talk to customers about Enterprise Mobility Suite is to remind them that back in the day, people used to purchase Word or Excel or PowerPoint as individual programs. And often what they would say is, well, I very rarely use PowerPoint. I very rarely use Excel, which is great until you need to use Excel for that reporting, item that came up, a few hours ago. And in that case, people realized, hey, even if I only use 1 or 2 of these programs regularly, it makes more sense from a cost perspective to license an entire suite of products to be able to use those other products, occasionally as well. And that's true about the products in the Enterprise Mobility Suite. You can certainly purchase any of these items standalone and a la carte. But as soon as you purchase 2 of them, it's much, much less expensive to wrap it up into this suite from a cost perspective. And so what Microsoft has said is we're going to license all 3 of these products together, enable some great value for customers, give them a great price, on bundling them together and see if this allows people to be much more secure and confident in managing both their mobile devices and identity and data protection together. We'll go into each of the sub-products in a few minutes to really dig into it, but just from a high-level 30,000-foot look at each of the products. One of the product is Azure Active Directory Premium. That product is all around making sure that your identities can be used both on premises as well as in the cloud, and that for cloud-based services, software as a service solutions, you can actually light up those scenarios in a way that's much more quick than to do it the traditional mechanism of having to stand up a very complex environment on premises to enable that. That includes the ability to do self-service. It includes the ability to do auditing reports and security. So what you'll start to see is that some of the features that right now aren't present in your own on-premises environment because they're too expensive to implement, not from a licensing perspective, but just a cost of services perspective, are actually automatically turned on in Azure Active Directory Premium. A scenario, and we'll go into a little bit more later, that traditionally would have been relatively difficult to do is to let you know as an administrator, what if people outside my environment are logging into my environment from an unusual location? Let's say they logged in from Mexico or Canada. In a traditional environment, you might have a very complex intrusion detection system to look for people who are doing malicious items. And that obviously would be quite expensive to implement. But the other flaw with that idea is it doesn't often base itself upon an end user's history. If all the time I'm opening up access to my corporate network from a vacation house, let's say I go down to the Outer Banks, after I do that 5 or 6 times, the platform should be smart enough to recognize, hey, this is a regular location that Reed logs into from. Whereas if I were to do the same thing from Toronto or from Eastern Europe, it should immediately flag it and say this is unusual. All of that's enabled in Azure Active Directory Premium. On the mobile device front, Windows Intune actually allows you to manage mobile devices seamlessly, regardless of the underlying OS. It supports iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. All of the 3 major phone providers have an agent that gets installed on the individual device, which allows Intune to go out there and do proactive management. You can do things like hardware inventory. You can actually push applications to the end device. It's not limited to just your line of business apps. You can actually go and get things from the store and send links to individuals to say, here are the types of applications that we need. And of course, you can do a selective wipe to make sure that if you need to wipe your corporate data and your corporate line of business applications, that you're not impacting the end user's device when you do that. The final component of the suite, again, we'll go into these in more detail in a minute. The final component is Azure Rights Management Service. And I certainly have worked with many customers who have thought about implementing Rights Management Service in the past. But the on-premises components, much like Azure AD Premium, didn't cost anything from a licensing perspective to light up. They were simply very technically complex to get working. And they involved a large number of different servers and services working in harmony to enable the service to do what you wanted it to do. With Azure Rights Management Service, instead of having to spend a lot of time spinning up servers and configuring components, effectively you're just turning on the service and then consuming it in all of your favorite apps. That could be on your cell phone, that could be in Microsoft Word, that could be me taking a picture. Whatever the mechanism that I use to consume content, I can use Rights Management Service to protect that content, not a day later or a week later, but at the moment of creation. And we'll go into this a little bit more later, but that previous slide where I was talking about protecting your devices versus protecting the data, I think it's critical to emphasize. If you're not protecting your data at the moment that you create it, from the moment you create it until the moment you actually choose to apply protection, anyone could forward that data to someone else. Anyone could copy that data somewhere else. And while it's unprotected, you have no ability to later reach back out and claw it back and be able to gain control of it. So what Azure Rights Management Service does is from the moment you create it, allows you to set up policies to say, perhaps I don't want to forward this on. Perhaps I don't want people to print this or take a screenshot of it. All of that's baked into the product. And from a price perspective, certainly it's an attractive price actually beating most of the individual components. Certainly lumping them together in this suite is a good value for customers. So let's talk about what the differences between these solutions and traditional solutions look like. And I mentioned earlier that some of the capabilities within something like an Azure Rights Management Service or an Azure AD Premium are things that you could traditionally do on premises. So you could certainly do rights management in an on-premises environment. It would be difficult to get that ability to scale up and down, and it would certainly be onerous to do that. From an identity management perspective, you can certainly use regular Windows Active Directory to be able to provide identity management solutions inside your organization. As soon as you step outside of your organization or you start to look at additional components, things in the cloud world, it becomes I would say, almost an imperative to start to leverage some of these solutions like Azure AD Premium, because your own internal Active Directory environment just isn't built to be able to scale up and down at the same speed that Azure AD Premium is. Now, the two can link together, but it's important to recognize when you move to a cloud-based solution, you're gaining some capabilities you'd never have. Things like in the Windows Intune suite of being able to manage mobile devices or manage mobile apps. You just couldn't do that in the traditional on-premises world with your on-premises tools and components. You could still manage PCs, certainly, and you could certainly manage tablets that were running some flavor of Windows 8, like a Surface Pro, but you couldn't manage devices that were mobile devices, which is a big miss for a lot of customers. So I know that we've discussed the Microsoft solutions for each of these different products. I think it's important to note that this isn't new. All of these three areas, identity management, mobile device management, and information protection, there are lots of customers, there are lots of vendors out there happy to sell those customers their solutions. This isn't an area that is a new area in any means. And as you can see in the key competitors section, there are lots of different competitors that Microsoft has in each of these spaces. The big benefit of going with Microsoft is that rather than having to cobble together a solution that incorporates a mobile device management platform, as well as information protection, as well as identity management, you can effectively just say, I'm going to choose the Microsoft solution, and it's going to work across the stack without me having to have multiple vendors or multiple contracts in order to be able to light this up. And as you may have seen over the past couple of years, Microsoft has strongly worked over that course of time to really get their development teams to be in a seamless, I would say, one Microsoft mentality, rather than having solutions that interoperate but don't kind of light up as nicely. Microsoft has really put a lot of muscle into making sure that all of these solutions work together seamlessly. Let's go right into the products themselves, because I think this is where you're going to start to see the biggest benefit for your organization. And I'll start with Windows Azure Active Directory Premium. This is a new service. It has come out quite recently to be able to provide some additional capabilities that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do in your existing on-premises environment. One idea is the idea of many apps and one identity repository. So there are lots of software as a service providers out there that are on the web that have ability to log in and authenticate and use their service. The problem with many of these software as a service providers is that you end up with having to remember 10 or 20 or 30 different passwords, one for each service, to be able to authenticate to give that ability. And if you think about it, many of the single sign-on solutions in the past have involved standing up some sort of capability on premises, whether it's a piece of hardware or a piece of software, and then configuring that piece of hardware or software to manually authenticate to each different software as a service application, which if you're an IT team is incredibly onerous. You know, one application could change, that would break your system, and you would need to go back in there and recode it for every single individual application. With Azure Active Directory Premium, effectively, you don't have to worry about the back end or the coding. You just light up the solution that's already listed there. And I apologize, this is a typo. This deck is probably about a month old. There are now over 700 different software as a service applications that are available. So every month that number of software as a service applications continues to expand beyond the current mix. You can go in there and browse the different apps that are in there, but they're all custom apps and apps developed by teams that really want to make sure that anyone can log into it. And it's not just the Microsoft stack. Obviously, Microsoft has a set of cloud services, things like Office 365, even Windows Intune itself, Dynamics CRM Online, to name a few. Those are all out of the box integrated. But you've also got Microsoft competitors in there as well, and even other items that may not be intuitive as a software as a service app. I'll use one-on-one as an example. So a lot of websites and web providers have software as a service applications that allow you to go in there and configure a website or a DNS name or what have you. By using Azure Active Directory Premium, you can tie those software as a service applications to very specific membership groups. You might have your CRM team be the team that's able to access a online CRM solution service like Dynamics CRM or Salesforce. You might have your HR team be able to access an online HR solution to be able to go in there and access that. And then rather than having to think when someone starts for the first time, have they been added to all the particular sites, you can actually use groups in your existing Active Directory to simply add them into that group and have that group automatically light up all the different software as a service apps that they need to have access to. Big benefit for your staff. Rather than having to remember 50 different websites that they need to go to, they can go to one centralized portal. That portal page will show all of the different software as a service websites that they need to go to that they're currently authenticated to log into. So it makes it much easier as an end user the first day or week to get up to speed, because I'm not having to remember and bookmark 50 different sites. I can simply log into my portal and select the sites that are contained within there. And that's, I would say, one of the biggest wins, is that in addition to me as an end user consuming that, on the administrative side, I can very easily add and remove people at the drop of a hat. So rather than having to say, okay, let's add these individuals to these specific sites, I can actually look at all the individuals tied to any particular app. I can use that group management to move people between groups and know if I move you from finance to HR, if you were hired for sales but actually we're moving you into marketing, that all those applications will follow with you in a very intuitive, easy to use fashion in one console. So I'm not having to hop between 50 different software as a service provider consoles. I'm using one console that I can use to move people between those different items. Makes it much more streamlined from an IT perspective. For enterprise apps, I mentioned this earlier, it's important to give people additional levels of control that they haven't previously had in the past. When you had a traditional legacy environment, you had a firewall, you had a corporate network boundary. The thought was, as an IT individual, was that as long as you protected that corporate network boundary, every single thing inside your organization was going to be protected. That was the kind of the GUI center and the hard shell around it. And the problem now is that people are logging in from locations outside your corporate network boundary to applications that might not be inside your corporate network boundary at all. I mean, when we mentioned software as a service application, if I go ahead and authenticate into a software as a service app that's run off of some data center, in California, I may never actually even traverse into the corporate network boundary without something like Azure AD to be able to do that authentication. And so being able to do reporting to say, hey, I noticed that these logins are coming from a location, that's one key advantage to Azure AD Premium. The second good advantage is that you can turn on multi-factor authentication. So you can require people, say, to put in a key code when they access a particular website. The ability to do that, especially for sensitive roles, things like IT administrators or heads of HR, heads of finance, can make sure that you don't have a very exposed surface to everyone in your organization, which ultimately protects you from risk and makes sure that your organization can remain profitable. And that is, I mentioned earlier, it is a machine learning based report. So as people start to work out of different offices, you'll get a report that says, hey, this was unusual today. 30 days later, that may track as a normal activity because the person is regularly working out of that office over and over. So it does make it very easy from an IT administrator's perspective to reduce that chaff and focus solely on the things that are odd. I remember using it even at an organization, I'll say last week, where one of the people left the organization, but their account hadn't been disabled properly. They didn't, there was nothing malicious that was going on. They left on perfectly good terms. But when the company got that email response from Azure Active Directory Premium, it effectively said that this individual was logging in from a remote location. It didn't know that they had been terminated yet, but it did note that this was an unusual location. And just that email was enough to have the IT admins at that organization say, oh, we must not have run the disabling user account procedure because we're still getting these authentication requests from an outside service. Completely innocuous, but if that had been a malicious person, it would have been able to nip it in the bud right there. And finally, from a user enablement perspective, that access panel, that portal that people can log into, not only gives them the ability to log in and consume the applications that they want to be able to run, but it also provides them the ability to run self-service password resets, even going back to their own on-premises Active Directory. So one of the frustrating parts that we've worked with customers in the past has been, if you're not in the office and you need to reset your password and you don't have any other mechanism set up to do it, that can be seen as a blocker. It can be seen as a way to prevent you from being able to do your work. By using Azure Active Directory Premium, that basic portal page does also include the ability to go back in there and reset your password on a regular basis. So all of this is included in the Azure Active Directory Premium product. It's a great product. It's only one of the three that are contained within the Enterprise Mobility Suite. Let's start talking about the next one, Windows Intune, unless you guys have questions about the suite right now that you wanted to bring up about Windows Azure Active Directory Premium. Christine, do we have any questions from the audience about that?
Nope, I'm not seeing any.
Okay. Happy to keep pushing forward. If you guys do have questions, again, just pop into the Q&A section to provide that to us. So let's talk about Windows Intune. So Windows Intune has a number of goals. The first goal is to make sure that you're allowing the staff at your organization to easily light up the service. Intune is a mobile device management framework that has a consistent experience across a variety of different devices. It doesn't matter if I have an iOS device or an Android device or a Windows phone. It doesn't matter if I have a Windows Surface or a Windows 8 desktop. All of those different devices, regardless of the sizes or form factors, have one single consistent experience to allow me to enroll the device. And from an IT person's perspective, historically, that's been seen as less important than providing an overarching security framework. And what we found working with customers is if customers don't enroll their devices in the system, then they don't get those security protections. So it's especially critical that you start by making it easy for staff to enroll their devices. And best of all, with Windows Intune, you get the ability to enroll up to 5 different devices per person, which seems like a lot of devices, but as we discussed in the earlier section, people are typically owning 3 devices or more per person right now as individuals who are knowledge workers. Being able to enroll 5 means that effectively you've got a little bit of protection as you start to gain devices to be able to enroll those new devices. But best of all, it means that when you go to your house, rather than saying that I'm going to only enroll my corporate device for management and protection, I can enroll my home device. I can enroll my home tablet and ensure that that device is not only getting things like up-to-date antivirus and up-to-date policy settings, but also the ability to consume applications that are contained within my environment. We like to use it as a carrot rather than stick approach. Effectively, you say, I've got all of these company applications. Some of them are line of business apps. Some are things like Microsoft Office or Adobe Creative Suite. Regardless of what that carrot is, individuals at your organization are always asking for an ability to consume them. They're always saying, I want a copy of Office for my home machine. I want a copy of Creative Suite for my wife's machine or what have you. And with Intune, you can effectively say if you enroll the device and you've got the licenses to be able to provide it to individuals, we'll be able to self-service those to people in your organization. So it makes it much easier. Rather than calling IT, you're actually just doing it yourself, which we found tends to be the sticky point. A lot of organizations already own the licensing for many of these products, but they recognize that if they install Creative Suite, if they install Microsoft Office on someone's home machine, inevitably that'll mean that the IT organization has to support that machine. And that's always been the big ask for customers is, I don't want to have to sit there and wait for the IT person to get done installing it. I want to install it on my time and on my schedule. And that could be a Saturday night. That could be a Sunday morning. I know my IT organization doesn't want to install it then, but if I have the rights to do that, I want to be able to do that. So enrolling your device in Intune gives you that ability to effectively ensure that people are enrolling the device and consuming the applications.
And Reed, is that just Windows devices?
No. So it's across all of the mobile device platforms right now that are the three major ones: iOS, Apple's iOS, Google's Android, Microsoft's Windows Phone. All of those are included, as well as your traditional desktop environments. Windows 7 and Windows 8 obviously are included as well. So whether it's a desktop or a laptop or a tablet or a mobile phone, Windows Intune will support any of those operating systems to be able to light up those experiences. So it is something that really spans across your entire organization. We've worked with many organizations to implement Intune, and by and large, because those operating systems are all supported, almost every customer falls into the category of being able to use it. One other thing that I think that is important to note is that it isn't a new concept for how to manage it. So when you're talking about how the tool sets work to be able to manage Intune, there's a web console because it is a hosted service. But being able to train people to log in and use those tools is not something that's new. People who have been deploying applications in the past, either for Windows devices or things like iOS or Android, aren't going to have to learn a completely different way to package up those applications. They'll simply take their already baked Android application or iOS application or Windows Phone application, or even Windows, now that Windows is supporting a unified universal executable for both Windows Phone and Windows itself. Any of those mechanisms you can upload into Windows Intune and you can push out to all of your devices. So because it's the same underlying application deployment mechanism, it makes it very easy to get your IT team up to speed on using it and making sure that it actually is going out to all those different items. This includes settings as well. When you think about things like turning off video cameras or requiring encryption, Apple and Google and Microsoft have all built different mechanisms for enabling and checking on things like encryption. But rather than having to train your team, this is how you check for encryption on an iOS device, this is how you check for encryption on an Android device, this is how you check for encryption on a Windows device. Effectively, Intune abstracts that away. It just says, do you want to require encryption? If so, I'm going to be smart enough to work with the specific vendor in the mechanism that they've chosen to require that capability. And as new features come out, certainly over the past couple of weeks, there have been some improvements to the way Android has done encryption with Samsung's Knox technology. As those improvements come out, I, as an end user of the service, don't have to know what the vagaries of that implementation are. I can simply make sure that it's lit up within the Intune console, and as long as it's supported, it'll go out to those specific devices and allow me to enforce things like encryption or video device being turned off out of the box. There are, of course, situations that require a wipe. And what we found with organizations is that there really is a difference between what staff want to be able to provide from a wiping perspective and what IT organizations want to be able to provide. IT orgs typically say, I want to be able to wipe the device at a moment's notice and wipe everything, and which is great if you're only focused on security and you're convinced the device has been lost but is somehow still communicating with the internet and that it could be maliciously under someone else's control. That's great. Most of the scenarios that we run into with customers are not scenarios where devices have been maliciously lost. Most of the time, the end user left it in a park, they left it in a cab, it was their fault, but it typically is their device, especially if it's a mobile device, and they don't see the need to go to IT to be able to wipe it. If they've lost their device in a cab, they recognize that it's their fault. they're going to go down to a T-Mobile store or a AT&T store and pick up a new phone immediately. But in the interim, they don't want to have to call up IT and tell IT, hey, I'm sorry I screwed up. Instead, they want to be able to go to a console themselves as soon as they realize the device is no longer under their control and wipe that device securely. And so being able to do that from a self-service perspective is critically important for staff. The other thing that staff have said at the customers we work with is that although they certainly appreciate that IT can do a full wipe, they really don't want IT poking around on their personal devices. You know, if they do a wipe, if IT does a wipe, they really just want them to pull back the corporate apps and the corporate data. They don't want them going into their personal contacts. They don't want them going through their list of software. And so Intune allows you to be very granular about what you're pulling in and out. Most of the other mobile device management manufacturers out there have this concept known as containerization. And containerization several years ago sounded great. It was this idea that instead of having one phone, you would effectively have two phones on every device. You'd have a corporate phone and a personal phone. And to use them, you'd flip between those two containers. You'd go into your corporate phone book to make a phone call to someone at work. You'd go into your personal calendar to look at a personal appointment. And what staff at almost every organization we've spoken to have said universally is that that containerization model just doesn't work. The problem in the field is that as people use their phone, they find themselves with contacts at work that they want to go to a happy hour with, or a calendar appointment that spans both environments, or even just using a mail app to send and receive email. Their personal mail app gets updated almost on a monthly basis by Apple or Google or Microsoft, and always has lots of features and a very rich set of capabilities. When they look at the mail app on the containerized side, the side built by the mobile device management provider itself, that's always much more crudely coded. It's not updated except on a rare basis, maybe once a year, if that, and it very rarely has the latest and greatest feature set. And so because of that, what people started to do is they started to use more of their personal containered side device because they didn't want to use the corporate controlled one because it didn't have as many features. It was a kludgy interface. It didn't work for them. And some people even went so far as to just not enroll their device in the mobile device management platform because they'd rather have a fully functional, brand new phone from Microsoft or Google or Apple than to hobble it with these IT policies that were preventing them from getting work done. Microsoft took a completely different approach and said, let's assume that containerization isn't going to work for organizations. Rather than focusing on containerization, let's focus on the corporate line of business applications and let's focus on the data. As long as you can get that data back, as long as an IT administrator can say, hey, you left the organization, let's say you left New Signature an hour ago, I can go into Intune and say, I want to pull back every corporate app that we've deployed to that device and every single bit of corporate data that we've exposed through those apps, I want to pull that off as well. It means that I'm not going in and looking at the list of software that they have installed. By default, Intune doesn't do a personal software inventory. I could have 10 different versions of, Angry Birds on my phone, and no one from corporate IT is going to know about that information. The corporate apps that they push, they'll know about, but only those are the apps that they need to worry about. And that's really been that consumerization of IT model, in that I do want to reach out to my company to get applications from them that are useful to me. I just don't need them to be poking around on the rest of the stuff of my phone. So when you do want to do a wipe, you can either do that self-service wipe yourself. You can, of course, as usual, have IT do a full wipe of the device if it is something that you lost, or you can do a full wipe yourself. And then the final model is actually doing that pullback of corporate application and corporate data that typically your IT organization would work on. So all of this together actually go into the Windows Intune model from a mobile device management perspective. It has a rich history of application deployment and device management on desktops and laptops and tablets. So those capabilities are certainly well known by many who have looked into in the past, but the mobile device features are relatively new. They've been out for a year and a half, almost 2 years now. A lot of organizations are starting to say, rather than going with these point solutions of a different identity provider, a different mobile device management platform, and a different ability to protect data, let's just centralize with EMS and do it all under one umbrella. Any questions on the Intune front, Christine?
I am not seeing any in the chat or Q&A, no.
Okay, great, and happy to answer those questions. New Signature was Microsoft's Intune Partner of the Year, so we know more about Intune than probably any partner, certainly in the U.S., to be able to answer your questions about its capabilities and feature set. And one thing that I didn't mention about Intune, but that is important, much like all of these cloud services, the development cycles at Microsoft are shorter and shorter. So Intune is actually developed on a 6-month rolling cycle. Every 6 months a new version comes out. They'll start lighting up those features in the June to July timeframe, and then again in the December to January timeframe. And so every 6 months you get a new set of items to help you more granularly control the devices in your environment. So let's talk about Windows Azure Rights Management. So rights management is not a new concept. It's something that's been around for many organizations for a long period of time. And the basic thrust is that you want to be able to protect content when you create it in your corporate environment. That could be a Word document. That could be an email. That could be something you store on SharePoint server. And in the past, in order to light up those features and functions, you needed to have two components. You needed a copy of Office, because rights management could hook into the Office suite. Even going back to Office 2003 and 2007, there were versions of rights management that could hook into that Office suite. If you're on 2010 or 2013, a modern version of Office, it's been capable of doing rights management for 10 years in the past. So it is something that Microsoft has put a lot of time and effort into. On the server side, you needed to have a number of server components to light up. You needed to typically have an Exchange server or a SharePoint server. You needed to have an Azure Rights Management server, and you needed to have the ability to actually surface this to people who were on the internet. So a series of web-facing servers that would actually be used to provide control inside the environment. To make it highly available, you double the number of servers you had. And so the configuration and lift to get rights management working in a corporate environment was significant. Most of our smaller and mid-sized customers just couldn't stomach the cost to put an implementation into. They recognized that there was a risk they were not being protected against, but they said, look, even though the licensing costs are zero, I'm going to have to pay some consultants to come in here and implement this, and that's just too great a lift to allow us to do that. With Windows Azure Rights Management, the best news is that all of this is available to you at the push of a button, rather than having consultants come in and spend hours working on your solution to get it to be functional. And it's extended from the Office suite to other applications as well. So out of the box, and I'll walk you through a scenario with Azure Rights Management. If I'm composing a Word document in Office 2013, I might start working on that document, and before I choose to save it, I might actually choose to set the sensitivity of that specific document. I might say that I don't want people to forward it to others. Maybe I don't want people to take screenshots of it. Maybe I don't want it to be printed. All of those are capabilities in the rights management solution based on the ability to ensure that the controls are configured within there. Once I set that specific policy setting, that policy setting will actually persist with the document wherever it goes. So this is the key detail with rights management. Once I've saved that document, it doesn't matter if I've saved it in a SharePoint site, doesn't matter if I've saved it in a file share, doesn't matter if I email it to someone. That document will always require people to check on the Azure Rights Management server before they're able to open and consume it. And this was the part of the service that most organizations loved but hated the complexity of, because in the past that would have meant that if I'm opening this up a file share at another company, my machine running Office would have to reach out to the internet to connect to some server that I as an organization was running out of a co-location facility that hopefully was up, that hopefully had a good connection to the internet, and then at that point then authenticated the person to consume it. That was a lot of effort to stand that up. With Azure Rights Management, all of that is handled by Microsoft. So rather than relying upon your own internal infrastructure and implementation engineers to get it, Microsoft has built the solution and provided it to you as a service. Another good example, I might have a report that I want people to review, but that within, I'll say, less than 7 days, I don't need to actually have people thinking about. It's something that is for a project this week. Maybe it kicks off on a Thursday. After Thursday, I don't want people to be viewing the document anymore. You can build in these timed items into a Word document or an Excel document or even an image and say, after this particular time, you will no longer be able to see this image or consume this Excel spreadsheet or look at this Word document. And you can set that the moment you create it to make sure that you know, oh, I'm going to be able to provide people access to this, but after I claw it back after 7 days or 2 weeks or however long that window is, I don't have to worry that someone kept another copy on another file server somewhere or another SharePoint site or a USB drive. And once you've done that, it dramatically lowers the risk that you as an organization have to face. We mentioned the device getting lost scenario before. You'll always want the ability to wipe those devices. You'll always want to be able to set some policies about the encryption on them, etc. But the other big factor to securing the data that's on there is to use something like rights management. Because let's say you created a sensitive policy, and that policy said by default, any item deemed sensitive is removed from consumption after 7 days. If you want to email it around, great. If you want to share on a SharePoint site, great. But after 7 days, the document effectively self-destructs, to use a colorful metaphor. The best part of that is if someone loses their phone and they've been consuming these sensitive documents for 2 or 3 or 6 months, if I've got that sensitive policy in place, I don't have to worry about the 5.5 months of documents that were being consumed on the phone and cached on the phone, because those are effectively gone. All I have to worry about is the 7 days worth of documents that might have been sent to that individual. That might be one document. It might be 2. But at least that greatly reduces the risk that I as an organization have to face. And if I use something like Intune, I can always choose to wipe the device as soon as I've learned that there is potentially sensitive information on there. So between those two technologies, between Intune managing the mobile device and rights management managing the actual data itself, you've got a great way for reducing your organizational risk while still making it easy for end users to consume. Because at the heart of it, if people are, have to jump through 5 or 6 hoops to setting these rights management policies, they're never going to do it. That's why Microsoft's investment in Office is so critical. I'm not having to learn a new concept. It merely shows up as an icon within my Office toolbar to set that policy at the click of a button. And that extends beyond the Office suite to other application providers. There's some PDF providers that have been first out of the gate. Companies like Foxit that have said, hey, we want to integrate this with our application stack as well because it's provided as a service. So over the next 6 months, much like with the Azure AD Premium service, the list of applications that support Azure Rights Management is going to continue to grow. And again, that focus will be on the interface. It'll be on me just selecting a button, saying this is sensitive. As an IT organization, we can build up those policies to decide what's sensitive or not sensitive in terms of what will it do to the actual. The system has
detected that a minimum number of lines are connected to this conference.
Underline that product.
Want to continue your meeting?
Though,
press 1 to confirm.
Ensure that your organization
the conference will end.
Move forward and with confidence again that the security on that underlying content is protected. And it can, and I didn't mention this before because we have a variety of customers on the phone right now, but it can also integrate with an existing on-premises environment. So it's not limited to applications and Office documents stored in the cloud. You could actually leverage this in a true hybrid scenario where you have some documents on premises and you have some documents in the cloud, or a completely distributed model where every individual person is actually consuming the rights management service, regardless of whether they're on a laptop or a tablet or a desktop in your environment or somewhere else. Christine, do we have any questions about the Azure Rights Management portion of the?
No, not at this time. We do not.
Okay, so I wanted to do a recap in terms of what the suite as a whole provides, because I think it is important to recognize what each of those components are. So let me flip back to my overarching top level slide so you guys see all of the components. So, and then we'll finish up by having an open time where people can ask questions at will. So to conclude, EMS is 3 different products grouped into a contiguous suite. There's Azure Active Directory Premium, Windows Intune, and Azure Rights Management Service. All 3 of those are included in the suite at a significant discount versus having to spin these up individually. If you're thinking of potentially trying to get a better handle on your mobile devices in your environment, on being able to ensure that the data in your environment is safe and secure, or even being able to get reports on whether people are coming in from locations that you have control over or don't have control over. All of these products will give you those capabilities. And as a suite, the value is huge, especially for IT professionals such as myself, because I don't want to have to hop between a bunch of different consoles and vendor products to be able to use these services. I just want to be able to work with Microsoft to make sure that they light up automatically. So it is in market right now. If you're interested in consuming any or all of these products as a suite, I would encourage you to reach out to New Signature, and we'll get your information to be able to light those up. And we can certainly go into deeper technical demos with your technical staff on each of these items. Some of these items, have been around for a while. I'll use Rights Management Service as an example. It's been out for 10 years in the on-premises component, but the cloud version is incredibly new. And because it is iterating every single month, even though you may have seen what the on-premises version of Rights Management Service is capable of, you definitely haven't seen what the Azure Rights Management Service is capable of, and would encourage you to set up a demo with us to show off what those deep feature sets are capable of doing. So with that, wanted to flip to my in slide and say, hey, there is a limited time offer that's going on right now that Microsoft is providing. It is a 40% discount if you're interested in attaching it to an existing enterprise agreement. I believe that promotion ends within the next couple of weeks. So it is something that if you were interested in doing, reach out to New Signature today because it's something that will probably go away at the end of next month. And certainly you don't want to wait until June 28th to decide that this was a good deal and you want to save 40%. We're happy to do a proof of content for all of these to show them off, and we're happy to provide you with additional web resources to give you information about the suite as a whole. With that, I wanted to open up for any final questions so that we could go over those. And if there aren't any questions, certainly let you guys have a bit of your time back.
So we have the IM chat open, and there's also a Q&A tab if you'd like to post some questions there. We are going to be following up with everyone individually if you had something specific about your scenario that you wanted to ask one-on-one. Reed, I think we can give it another minute or so, but I'm not seeing anything pop up.
Happy to do that. And we're happy to, even after we conclude the webinar, to make sure that we follow up to make sure you guys have any additional questions answered. One thing I'll certainly say from my personal experience while we're waiting to see if anyone has any additional questions, these products are incredible products, and they're things that IT professionals have very rarely had the time or the energy to devote to. I remember talking with organizations 5 or 6 years ago about Rights Management Suite and saying, hey, this is an incredible product. And the #1 complaint I got from customers was, it is incredible. It is, included in the licensing. I just will have to pay a consulting firm to spend hundreds upon hundreds of hours to spin it up. And because of that, the benefits don't align with it just being a button click in the latest version of Azure RMS as part of the Enterprise Mobility Suite. It couldn't be easier for consumers to turn on, and you don't have to go in and have a large consulting presence to get it working. You could start using it today, even inside your own Word application on a trial basis.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to stop the recording now.